The woman who called the black cleaning lady worthless trash had no idea she was insulting the billionaire who owned every brick of the luxury building she lived in. The marble floors of Meridian Towers gleamed under the crystal chandeliers as dawn broke over Manhattan's Upper East Side. This wasn't just any apartment building. It was one of the most exclusive residential addresses in New York City, where penthouses sold for $20 million, and the waiting list for residency stretched longer than most people's mortgages. At 6:30 in the morning, the lobby was pristine and empty, save for the soft sound of classical music playing through hidden speakers and the gentle hum of the building's state-of-the-art ventilation system. That peaceful silence was broken by the arrival of Angela Thompson, a 42-year-old black woman pushing a cleaning cart loaded with supplies. She wore simple navy blue scrubs, comfortable sneakers that had seen better days, and her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. To anyone watching, she looked exactly like what she appeared to be, a hard-working cleaning lady arriving for her early morning shift. What nobody in Meridian Towers knew was that Angela Thompson was worth $4.7 billion. She was the founder and CEO of Thompson Industries, a global empire that included everything from real estate development to renewable energy technology. She owned 17 buildings in Manhattan alone, including the very building she now entered each morning disguised as cleaning staff. More importantly, she was the anonymous owner of Meridian Towers itself. Angela had purchased the building 3 years ago through a complex web of holding companies and trusts that kept her identity completely hidden. She'd been looking for investment properties when she'd heard disturbing stories about how the building's management treated their service workers, stories of discrimination, wage theft, and systematic abuse of the very people who kept the luxury building running. So she'd done what she always did when faced with injustice. She'd bought the problem and set out to fix it. But first, she needed to understand exactly what was happening from the ground level. For the past 2 months, Angela had been working the early morning cleaning shift at her own building. She'd created a false identity, complete with employment records and references, and applied for the job through the building's management company. To them, she was just another cleaning lady named Angie who needed work. The experience had been enlightening in the worst possible way. Angela pushed her cart toward the elevator, nodding politely to Marcus, the overnight security guard who was reading a newspaper at his desk. Marcus was a good man. She'd learned that during her weeks of observation. He treated everyone with respect, helped elderly residents with their packages, and never made the cleaning staff feel invisible. "Morning, Angie," Marcus said with a warm smile. "How's your daughter doing with her college applications?" Angela had created an elaborate backstory about being a single mother working multiple jobs to support her college-bound daughter. The lie sat uncomfortably with her, but it served its purpose. It made her invisible to the residents who might otherwise look too closely. "She's doing well, thank you for asking," Angela replied, still waiting to hear back from a few schools. "She's gonna do great," Marcus said with conviction. "Smart girl like that with a mother who works as hard as you do? She's going places." If only he knew that Angie's daughter was actually a scholarship program Angela had created to send underprivileged students to college. Over the past 5 years, the Thompson Foundation had funded full rides for over 300 students. But that was a secret that would have to wait. Angela wheeled her cart into the elevator and pressed the button for the 15th floor. The ride up was quiet, giving her time to review what she'd learned during her 2 months of undercover work. The building's management company, Harrison and Associates, was everything she'd heard and worse. They paid cleaning staff below minimum wage, often forgot to provide health insurance, and created a culture where service workers were treated as subhuman. The building manager, Richard Harrison himself, regularly screamed at cleaning staff and had fired 3 women in the past month for minor infractions like accidentally disturbing a resident's newspaper. But the residents themselves were often just as bad. Angela had witnessed acts of casual cruelty that still made her stomach turn. Residents who threw trash on the floor immediately after she'd cleaned it, just to watch her pick it up. People who spoke about the cleaning staff as if they were furniture, discussing their personal lives in front of them as if they couldn't hear or understand. And then there was Victoria Ashford. The elevator doors opened on the 15th floor, and Angela stepped into the hallway that had become her least favorite part of this entire experience. Apartment 15C belonged to Victoria Ashford, a 38-year-old woman who had inherited her late husband's pharmaceutical fortune and seemed to believe that wealth gave her the right to treat other human beings like garbage. Angela had been cleaning Victoria's apartment for 6 weeks, and each encounter had been worse than the last. Victoria had a particular talent for creative cruelty. She would deliberately spill wine on carpets just before Angela arrived, then berate her for not cleaning it properly. She would leave passive-aggressive notes about cleaning that was unsatisfactory, even when Angela had spent hours making the apartment spotless. Most painfully, Victoria seemed to take genuine pleasure in making personal attacks designed to hurt and humiliate. But today was different. Today, Angela was carrying something special in her cleaning cart, something that would change everything. Hidden beneath the cleaning supplies was a manila envelope containing documents that Victoria Ashford would never see coming. Documents that would reveal exactly who had been cleaning her apartment for the past 6 weeks. Angela knocked softly on the door of 15C, already bracing herself for whatever fresh cruelty Victoria had planned for this morning. "Come in," Victoria's voice called from inside, carrying its usual tone of irritated impatience. Angela used her master key to enter the apartment and immediately understood that today was going to be especially challenging. Victoria's living room looked like a tornado had passed through it. Empty wine bottles covered the coffee table. Takeout containers were scattered across the expensive Persian rugs, and expensive clothing had been carelessly thrown across the white leather furniture. Victoria Ashford emerged from her bedroom wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like she was posing for a lifestyle magazine, except for the cruel satisfaction in her eyes as she surveyed the mess she'd obviously created deliberately. "Well, well," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Look what the cat dragged in. How are we today, Angie?" The way Victoria said Angie made it sound like a disease. Angela had heard that tone countless times over the past weeks, the particular brand of condescension reserved for people Victoria considered beneath her notice. "Good morning, Ms. Ashford," Angela replied evenly. "I'll get started on the living room." "Oh, you certainly will," Victoria said, settling into an armchair where she could watch Angela work. "I had some friends over last night, and I'm afraid we got a bit enthusiastic with our celebrations." Angela began picking up the empty bottles, noting that Victoria had deliberately poured red wine on the white carpet in multiple locations. This wasn't accidental spillage. This was vandalism designed to create maximum work for the cleaning staff. "Careful with those bottles," Victoria said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "They're worth more than you make in a month. Not that you'd understand the difference between good wine and the cheap stuff you probably drink." Angela said nothing, continuing to clean methodically. She'd learned that responding to Victoria's provocations only encouraged more abuse. "You know," Victoria continued, clearly warming up to her favorite subject, "I was talking to my friends last night about the help these days. The quality has really gone downhill. In my mother's time, cleaning ladies knew their place. They were grateful for the work, respectful to their betters." She stood up and walked closer to Angela, who was kneeling to scrub wine stains from the carpet. "But people like you," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a more intimate cruelty. "You act like you deserve respect, like you're somehow equal to the people who actually matter in this world." Angela's hands stilled on the carpet for just a moment, but she forced herself to continue cleaning. She had endured worse insults during her time here, though each one felt like a slap. "Look at you," Victoria continued, clearly enjoying herself, "scrubbing floors like the worthless piece of trash you are. This is where you belong, on your knees, cleaning up after your betters." The words hit like physical blows, but Angela had learned to absorb Victoria's cruelty without showing reaction. What Victoria didn't know was that every insult, every act of deliberate humiliation, was being carefully catalogued for a very specific purpose. "Ms. Ashford," Angela said quietly, still scrubbing the carpet, "I need to inform you that the building management is implementing some policy changes." Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Policy changes?" What could possibly change that would affect someone like you? Let me guess, they're going to make you work even harder for even less money? Angela reached into her cleaning cart and pulled out the manila envelope she'd been carrying. Inside were documents that would change Victoria Ashford's life forever. Actually, Angela said, standing up slowly and facing Victoria directly for the first time in weeks. The changes are more significant than you might expect. Something in Angela's tone made Victoria pause. For the first time since Angela had been working in the apartment, Victoria looked uncertain. "What are you talking about?" Victoria demanded, her voice losing some of its confident cruelty. Angela opened the envelope and pulled out the first document, an official letterhead that Victoria would recognize immediately. "This is a notice from the building's ownership," Angela said, her voice still calm but carrying a new authority. "Effective immediately, there are new policies regarding treatment of building staff." Victoria snatched the document from Angela's hands, her eyes scanning the text with growing confusion and irritation. "This is ridiculous," Victoria snapped. "Building owners don't care about cleaning staff policies. This must be some sort of mistake." "Actually," Angela said, pulling out a second document, "the building owner cares very much about how residents treat the people who work here." The second document was a lease violation notice, detailing specific incidents of verbal abuse, deliberate property damage, and harassment of building staff. Each incident was dated and described in precise detail. Victoria's face went pale as she read the list of her own actions being reflected back at her. "This is impossible," she whispered. "How could anyone know about? Who's been watching me?" Angela reached into the envelope one more time and pulled out the final document, the one that would shatter Victoria Ashford's world completely. It was a copy of the building's deed, showing the true ownership of Meridian Towers. And at the top of the page in clear black letters was a name that made Victoria's blood run cold. Owner, Thompson Industries, LLC. CEO and primary shareholder, Angela Thompson. Victoria stared at the document, then at Angela, then back at the document as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "This can't be real," Victoria said, her voice barely a whisper. You're just a cleaning lady." Angela pulled off her cleaning gloves slowly, revealing the 2-carat diamond ring she'd kept hidden beneath them for weeks. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out her real identification, a driver's license and business card that confirmed what the documents were telling Victoria. Dr. Angela Thompson, founder and CEO, Thompson Industries. "Actually," Angela said, her voice still gentle but now carrying unmistakable authority, "I'm the woman you've been calling worthless trash for the past 6 weeks. I'm also the person who owns the building you live in, the company that manages your lease and the foundation that could change your life or end your residency here with a single phone call." Victoria's legs seemed to give out. She collapsed back into her armchair, staring at Angela as if seeing a ghost. "But you work here. You clean my apartment." "I own this apartment," Angela corrected gently. "I own every apartment in this building. I've been working here because I wanted to understand how my employees and tenants treat the people who serve them." The color had completely drained from Victoria's face. "Oh my God, what have I done?" Angela looked around the deliberately trashed apartment, thinking about the 6 weeks of systematic cruelty she'd endured, the personal attacks designed to dehumanize and humiliate her. "You've shown me exactly who you are," Angela said quietly. "The question now is what we're going to do about it." The silence in Victoria Ashford's apartment was deafening. Angela watched as the woman who had spent 6 weeks calling her worthless trash struggled to process the magnitude of her mistake. Victoria's hands were shaking as she held the building deed, reading Angela's name over and over as if it might change. "Dr. Thompson?" Victoria whispered, the title sounding foreign on her lips after weeks of calling her Angie with such disdain. I don't understand. Why would someone like you work as a cleaning lady?" Angela moved to the window overlooking Central Park, her mind drifting to a memory that felt both distant and immediate. 23 years earlier, Angela had been 19 years old, working 3 minimum wage jobs to pay for community college. One of those jobs was cleaning offices in a downtown Chicago high-rise. She'd been mopping the floors of a law firm when she'd overheard a conversation that would change her life forever. "Look at her," one of the lawyers had said, not bothering to lower his voice as Angela worked nearby. "Probably never even finished high school. These people don't have the capacity for anything better than manual labor." "That's what they're suited for," his colleague had agreed. "Cleaning up after people who actually contribute to society." Angela had been carrying a 4 GPA at the time, studying biochemistry and dreaming of starting her own pharmaceutical company. She'd been 3 semesters away from transferring to Northwestern University on an academic scholarship. But in that moment, crouched on the floor with a mop in her hands, she'd been reduced to nothing more than a stereotype in their minds. That night, she'd made a promise to herself. She would build something so significant that people like those lawyers would never again have the power to diminish someone based on their circumstances. "Dr. Thompson?" Victoria's voice brought Angela back to the present. "Please, I need to understand what's happening." Angela turned from the window, studying the woman who had unknowingly recreated that painful memory from her past. Victoria looked smaller now, her earlier arrogance replaced by genuine fear. "You want to understand?" Angela said quietly. "Then let me tell you about the real reason I've been working here." She walked to Victoria's expensive white couch, the same couch where Victoria had casually thrown food and wine for Angela to clean up, and sat down with the dignity of someone who belonged there. 3 years ago, I started hearing reports about Harrison and Associates and how they managed this building. Stories about service workers being mistreated, wages being stolen, people being fired for standing up for themselves. Angela's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "So I bought the building. Not to make money. I have more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I bought it because I wanted to create a place where working people were treated with dignity." Victoria was listening with the intensity of someone whose entire future hung on every word. "But ownership from a distance isn't enough," Angela continued. "I needed to understand what was really happening from the ground level. So I created an identity, applied for a job, and started working here to see how my investment was really being managed." "And what did you find?" Victoria asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. Angela stood and walked to the coffee table where Victoria had deliberately scattered trash for her to clean. She picked up one of the empty wine bottles, a vintage that cost $800. "I found systematic abuse of workers who couldn't fight back, management that steals wages and provides no benefits, and residents who treat human beings like they're less than animals." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Victoria buried her face in her hands. "Dr. Thompson, I am so sorry. I never meant... I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Angela's voice remained gentle, but the question was pointed. "That I was wealthy? That I owned the building? Or that I was a human being who deserved basic respect?" The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. I don't have an excuse. What I did was wrong, regardless of who you were." Angela nodded slowly. "That's the first honest thing you've said to me since I started working here." She walked to the window again, looking down at the street where early morning commuters were beginning their day. Many of them were service workers, doormen, cleaning staff, maintenance crews, the invisible army that kept the city running. Angela remembered another moment from her past. She'd been 26 years old, fresh out of graduate school with her PhD in biochemistry, when she'd walked into her first board meeting as the founder of what would become Thompson Industries. She'd been the only black person in the room, the only woman under 50, and definitely the only one who had ever worked a minimum wage job. "Miss Thompson," the lead investor had said, his tone suggesting he was speaking to a child, "perhaps you'd be more comfortable if we brought in some experienced executives to run the actual company. You could maintain a consultative role." The implication had been clear. She might have had the scientific knowledge to create the revolutionary drug formulations that would make the company billions, but she wasn't the kind of person who could be trusted to lead a real business. That dismissal had motivated her to build something so undeniable that no one would ever again question her capacity for leadership. If this story is touching your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Dr. Thompson, Victoria said, her voice smaller than Angela had ever heard it. What can I do to make this right? Angela turned back to face her. Victoria, do you remember what you said to me yesterday morning when I was cleaning your bathroom? Victoria's face went pale. I said a lot of things. I was in a bad mood. You told me that people like me were born to serve people like you, Angela said, her voice still quiet but carrying the weight of accumulated pain. You said I should be grateful that someone of your caliber was willing to let me clean her toilet. The memory of those words seemed to physically pain Victoria. Oh God, I actually said that. You did. And when I accidentally bumped into your dresser and knocked over a picture frame, you told me to be more careful because replacing that frame would cost more than my worthless life was worth. Each recalled quote hit Victoria like a slap. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she was forced to confront the cruelty of her own words. Dr. Thompson, please. I know there's nothing I can say to excuse what I've done, but I'm begging you, please don't destroy my life over this. Angela studied Victoria carefully. The terror on her face was genuine, but was it remorse for her actions or fear of consequences? Tell me something, Victoria, Angela said. If I really had been just a cleaning lady, if I had no power, no money, no way to fight back, would you be apologizing right now? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, clearly struggling with the uncomfortable truth. I want to believe I would, she said finally, but honestly, I don't know. I've become someone I don't recognize. It was another moment of unexpected honesty. Angela walked to her cleaning cart and pulled out a notebook she'd been keeping throughout her time in the building. It was filled with detailed observations about every interaction she'd witnessed. Victoria, you're not the only resident who's treated me badly, Angela said, flipping through pages of notes. Mrs. Henderson in 12A regularly throws food on the floor just to watch me clean it up. Mr. Phillips in 8B has never once acknowledged my existence, even when I say good morning. The teenage daughter in 16C likes to film me working and mock my appearance on social media. Victoria listened with growing horror as Angela cataloged the casual cruelty she'd witnessed throughout the building. But you, Angela continued, you've been the worst. Not just rude or dismissive, actively cruel. Deliberately creating work for me, personally attacking my intelligence, my appearance, my worth as a human being. Angela closed the notebook and looked directly at Victoria. So I need to understand something. Are you sorry because you hurt another person? Or are you sorry because that person turned out to have the power to hurt you back? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the question. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Both, she admitted. I'm terrified of what you could do to me, but I'm also ashamed, deeply ashamed of who I've become. She looked around her expensive apartment as if seeing it for the first time. My husband left me this fortune when he died, and somewhere along the way, I started believing that wealth made me better than other people. More important, more valuable. Victoria stood up and walked to a framed photo on her mantelpiece, a picture of her late husband volunteering at a homeless shelter. Richard would be horrified by what I've become, she said, touching the frame gently. He spent his life trying to help people, and I've spent mine looking down on them. Angela watched this moment of vulnerability with interest. For the first time since she'd started working in this apartment, Victoria seemed like a real person rather than a caricature of entitled cruelty. Victoria, Angela said, I bought this building because I believe people can change. I believe institutions can change. But change requires more than just fear of consequences. She walked to the apartment door, then paused with her hand on the handle. I'm going to finish my shift today. I have 6 more apartments to clean, and I intend to complete the job I was hired to do. When I'm done, I'm going to make some decisions about the future of this building and everyone in it. Victoria looked panicked. What kind of decisions? Angela opened the door, then turned back one final time. That depends on what I see in the next few hours, whether the cruelty I've experienced here is systematic or just a few bad actors. whether people are capable of treating others with dignity when they think it matters. She paused, studying Victoria's face. And whether someone who has spent weeks dehumanizing another person is capable of genuine change, or just temporarily afraid of consequences. The door closed behind Angela with a soft click, leaving Victoria alone with the weight of her actions and the uncertainty of her future. As Angela pushed her cleaning cart toward the elevator, she reflected on the conversation that had just ended. Victoria's fear was obvious, but underneath it, there had been something else. A glimmer of genuine remorse that might be worth nurturing. But Angela had learned long ago that true character was revealed not in moments of crisis, but in the choices people made when they thought no one was watching. The real test would come in the next few hours, as word of this morning's revelation spread through the building. How would Victoria behave when she thought Angela wasn't monitoring her every move? How would the other residents react when they learned their cleaning lady was actually their landlord? And most importantly, would discovering Angela's true identity inspire genuine change in how these people treated others? Or would it simply make them more careful about hiding their cruelty? The elevator doors opened on the 16th floor, where Angela had 4 more apartments to clean before her shift ended, 4 more opportunities to observe the character of people who had no idea their entire world was about to change. As she walked down the hallway, Angela thought about the scared woman she'd left behind in apartment 15C. Victoria Ashford was about to face the most important choice of her life, and she had no idea that her future depended entirely on what she chose to do next. Angela's cartwheels echoed softly against the marble floors of the 16th floor as she approached apartment 16C. Through the thin walls of luxury buildings, sound traveled in ways residents never considered, and what Angela heard made her pause. Victoria's voice, muffled but audible, was speaking rapidly on the phone. "Mother, I need you to listen to me carefully. Something terrible has happened. No, I'm not hurt physically, but I may have destroyed my entire life." Angela continued past the door, but Victoria's voice followed her down the hallway. "The cleaning lady the woman who's been working here. Mother, she owns the entire building. She's worth billions, and I've been treating her like garbage for weeks." Angela felt a mix of curiosity and caution. Victoria's first instinct had been to call her mother, but was this conversation about damage control or genuine remorse? She reached apartment 16C and knocked softly. The door opened to reveal Cynthia Morrison, a teenage girl Angela had observed for weeks. Cynthia was the daughter of 2 investment bankers who traveled constantly, leaving their 16-year-old daughter essentially unsupervised in their $4 million apartment. "Oh, it's you," Cynthia said with the particular brand of disdain that only teenagers could perfect. "Finally. The place is a disaster." Angela entered the apartment and immediately understood why. The previous night had clearly been another of Cynthia's unsupervised parties. Empty bottles littered expensive furniture, food was ground into Persian rugs, and someone had apparently thought it would be amusing to spray champagne on the oil paintings that hung on the walls. But something was different about today. As Angela began cleaning, she noticed Cynthia watching her with an unusual intensity. "So," Cynthia said, settling into a chair where she could observe Angela's work, "I got an interesting phone call about 20 minutes ago." Angela continued cleaning without responding, but she could feel the shift in the room's energy. "Mrs. Ashford from 15C called my mom," Cynthia continued, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. She was practically hysterical, talking about some big secret about the cleaning lady. Angela's hand stilled for just a moment as she wiped down a table covered in sticky champagne residue. Cynthia stood up, pulling out her phone. "She said you're not really who you pretend to be, that you're actually rich or something ridiculous like that." The teenager walked closer, her expression a mixture of skepticism and cruel amusement. "So I decided to do a little research." Angela felt her heart rate increase slightly, but she continued cleaning methodically. "Thompson Industries," Cynthia read from her phone screen. "Founded by Dr. Angela Thompson, described as one of the most successful black female entrepreneurs in American history. Net worth estimated at $4.7 billion. Angela stopped cleaning and slowly turned to face the teenager. Cynthia held up her phone, showing a professional headshot of Angela from a Forbes magazine article. Funny thing about Google image search, it works really well when you know what you're looking for. The two women stared at each other across the trash department, the pretense finally dropping completely. So, Cynthia said, her voice dripping with teenage sarcasm, Dr. Angela Thompson, billionaire pharmaceutical mogul, has been scrubbing my toilet for 6 weeks. The question is, why? Angela set down her cleaning supplies and faced Cynthia directly. At 16, this girl had already learned to wield cruelty with surgical precision. Angela had watched her film herself mocking the cleaning staff, posting videos on social media where she referred to them as the help, and made jokes about their appearances and accents. Why do you think? Angela asked quietly. Cynthia laughed, a sound without warmth. Oh, this is rich. You're like some kind of undercover boss thing, aren't you? Testing to see how the little people treat the working class? Something like that? Well, congratulations, Cynthia said, gesturing around the deliberately trashed apartment. You've discovered that rich people can be mean to poor people. What a shocking revelation. Angela studied the teenager's face, seeing something that surprised her. Underneath the sarcasm and cruelty, there was pain. Deep, unaddressed pain that had been masked by privilege and power. Cynthia, Angela said gently, when was the last time you saw your parents? The question clearly caught the girl off guard. What does that have to do with anything? Just curious. You're 16 years old, living alone in a $4 million apartment, throwing parties for strangers. When was the last time your parents were actually here? Cynthia's defensive posture faltered slightly. They're busy. Important work. They travel a lot for business. How often do they call? Look, this isn't about them. This is about you lying to everyone, pretending to be something you're not. Angela sat down on one of the expensive chairs, ignoring the champagne stains on the upholstery. You're right. I have been pretending, but so have you. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've been pretending that being cruel to other people makes you feel better about being abandoned by your own parents. The words hit like a physical blow. Cynthia's face crumpled for just a moment before she rebuilt her defensive walls. You don't know anything about my life. I know you're lonely, Angela said softly. I know you throw parties for people who don't actually care about you, because any attention feels better than being alone. I know you post videos mocking the cleaning staff because it makes you feel powerful in a life where you have no real control. Cynthia was crying now, though she was trying hard to hide it. And I know, Angela continued, that underneath all that anger and cruelty, you're just a scared kid who wants someone to notice that you exist. Stop, Cynthia whispered. Just stop. Angela's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and saw it was from Marcus, the security guard downstairs. Dr. Thompson, there's a situation developing in the lobby. Several residents are asking questions about this morning's incident with Mrs. Ashford. Mrs. Henderson from 12A is particularly upset and demanding to speak with building management. I thought you should know. Angela showed the message to Cynthia. It seems word is spreading faster than expected. Cynthia read the message, then looked back at Angela with new understanding. This is really happening, isn't it? You really do own this building. I really do. And now everyone's going to find out how they've been treating you. Angela nodded. The question is what you're going to do with that information. Cynthia was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what was happening. What do you mean? I mean you have a choice to make. You can continue being the cruel, lonely teenager who hurts other people to feel better about herself. Or you can decide to become someone different. Angela stood up and walked to the window overlooking the building's courtyard. Below, she could see several residents gathered in animated conversation, their body language suggesting urgent discussion. Cynthia, in about an hour, I'm going to go downstairs and reveal my identity to everyone in this building. When I do, your behavior toward me and other staff members is going to become public knowledge. The teenager's face went pale. You're going to tell everyone about the videos? About the things I said? Angela turned back to face her. That depends entirely on what you choose to do in the next hour. What do you want me to do? I want you to think about the person you want to be. Not the person your absent parents shaped through neglect, not the person your privilege allows you to be, but the person you choose to be when faced with the opportunity to change. Angela's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Victoria Ashford. Dr. Thompson, Victoria's voice was shaky through the speaker. I need to tell you something important. After you left, I called Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Phillips. I told them about your real identity. Angela felt a chill of concern. Why would you do that? Because I realized something while you were gone. If I kept this secret, I'd just be protecting myself while leaving you vulnerable to continued mistreatment from other residents. That would make me complicit in their behavior. Angela was genuinely surprised by this development. What was their reaction? Panic, mostly. Mrs. Henderson is threatening to sue the building management for fraud. Mrs. Phillips is claiming you violated his privacy by working in his apartment under false pretenses. They're both terrified about what this means for their residency here. Angela looked at Cynthia, who was listening to the conversation with growing understanding of the consequences approaching. Victoria, Angela said, I appreciate your honesty, but you may have complicated things significantly. I know. But Dr. Thompson, I realized that my first instinct was to protect myself by keeping your secret. That would have been just another form of the selfishness that got me into this situation in the first place. There was something different in Victoria's voice, a clarity that hadn't been there during their earlier conversation. I'm calling because I want to make you an offer, Victoria continued. Let me help you confront the other residents. Let me stand with you when you reveal your identity to the building. I want to publicly acknowledge how I treated you and why it was wrong. Angela was speechless for a moment. This was not the response she had expected from Victoria Ashford. Dr. Thompson? Victoria's voice was uncertain. Are you there? I'm here. Victoria, are you sure about this? Once you publicly acknowledge your behavior, there's no taking it back. I'm certain. For the first time in years, I'm absolutely certain about something. I want to be better than I've been, and that starts with taking responsibility for my actions. Angela looked at Cynthia, who was watching this conversation with something approaching awe. Victoria, I'll consider your offer. But first I need to finish what I started here. She ended the call and turned back to Cynthia, who was staring at her with new respect. She's really going to help you? Cynthia asked. It seems that way. Even though it might destroy her reputation? Especially because it might destroy her reputation. Real change requires real risk. Cynthia was quiet for several minutes, clearly processing everything she'd witnessed. Dr. Thompson, she said finally, if I wanted to change, if I wanted to be different, what would that look like? Angela smiled. The first genuine smile she'd allowed herself during her entire time in this building. It would look like a 16-year-old girl choosing to become the person she's capable of being, rather than the person her circumstances created. And practically speaking, Angela walked to Cynthia's expensive computer setup, where the teenager had been editing and posting her cruel videos about the building staff. It would start with taking down every video you've posted that mocks or dehumanizes other people. Not because you're afraid of consequences, but because you've decided that's not who you want to be. Cynthia looked at her computer, then back at Angela. And then you come downstairs with Victoria and me, and you take responsibility for your actions in front of everyone in this building. That's terrifying. The best decisions usually are. Angela's phone rang again. This time it was Marcus from the security desk. Dr. Thompson, you need to know. Mrs. Henderson just called building management and demanded that all cleaning staff be fired immediately. She's claiming that allowing deceptive employees to work in residents' homes violates their lease agreements. Angela closed her eyes, feeling the weight of what was about to unfold. Marcus, how many residents are in the lobby now? About 15, and more are coming down every few minutes. Dr. Thompson, I think you need to get down here soon. This situation is escalating rapidly. Angela looked at Cynthia, who had overheard the conversation. So, Cynthia said, it's time? It's time. The teenager walked to her computer and began deleting videos with swift, decisive clicks. Dr. Thompson, when we go downstairs, will you stand with me when I apologize to everyone I've hurt? Angela felt something powerful stirring in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced years ago when she decided to build something that mattered. Cynthia, I'd be honored to stand with you. As they prepared to leave the apartment, Angela reflected on the unexpected turns this day had taken. She'd begun the morning expecting to continue her quiet observation. Instead, she was about to face a room full of panicked residents with two unlikely allies who had chosen transformation over self-protection. The next hour would determine not just the future of Meridian Towers, but whether genuine change was possible when people were forced to confront the truth about themselves. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like descending into a storm, but for the first time in weeks, Angela wasn't facing it alone. The elevator descended through 15 floors, but for Angela, Victoria, and Cynthia, it felt like falling through layers of their own transformation. When the doors opened to reveal the Meridian Towers lobby, they stepped into what could only be described as controlled chaos. 23 residents had gathered in the marble-floored space, their voices creating a cacophony of indignation, fear, and confusion. Mrs. Henderson from 12A stood at the center of the group like a general marshalling troops, her voice cutting through the noise with aristocratic authority. "This is a violation of our privacy," she was declaring to anyone who would listen. "We have a right to know who's working in our homes. This woman has been deceiving us for months." Mr. Phillips from 8B, a man who had never once acknowledged Angela's existence, was pacing near the information desk. "I'm calling my lawyer. This has to be illegal. You can't just spy on people in their homes." Marcus stood behind the security desk, his expression a mixture of professional calm and barely contained amazement as he watched his usually composed residents lose their collective minds. When the elevator doors opened and Angela stepped out in her cleaning uniform, followed by Victoria and Cynthia, the lobby fell silent. Mrs. Henderson was the first to recover her voice. "There she is," she pointed at Angela with theatrical indignation. "The fraud who's been violating our privacy." Angela walked calmly to the center of the lobby, Victoria and Cynthia flanking her with visible nervousness but determination. The crowd of residents formed a loose semicircle around them, their faces displaying various mixtures of anger, fear, and curiosity. "Good morning," Angela said, her voice carrying easily through the space despite its gentle tone. "I understand there are some questions about my employment here." "Questions?" Mrs. Henderson's voice rose to near hysteria. "You've been lying to all of us, working in our homes under false pretenses. This is fraud, and I'm going to see you prosecuted to the full extent of the law." Angela nodded calmly. "Mrs. Henderson, you're absolutely right. I have been working here under a false identity. My real name is Dr. Angela Thompson, and I'm the founder and CEO of Thompson Industries." The silence that followed was profound. Several residents pulled out their phones, clearly Googling the name Angela had just provided. "But more importantly," Angela continued, "I'm the owner of this building." The silence shattered as multiple conversations erupted simultaneously. "That's impossible. She's lying. How could a cleaning lady?" Angela raised her hand, and something in her bearing, the quiet authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms, caused the crowd to quiet. "I purchased Meridian Towers 3 years ago through Thompson Holdings, LLC, she continued. "I've been working here for the past 2 months because I wanted to understand how this building was being managed and how residents treated the people who serve them." Mrs. Henderson's face had gone from red with indignation to pale with growing understanding. "You're saying you own our building? That's ridiculous." Angela pulled out her phone and made a quick call. "Marcus, could you please unlock the management office and retrieve the building ownership documents from the safe?" Marcus, who had been watching the proceedings with fascination, immediately moved to comply. Within minutes, he returned with official documents that he handed to Angela. She held up the deed to Meridian Towers, clearly showing Thompson Industries as the primary owner. "I think you'll find everything is quite legal and well documented, Mr. Philip snatched the documents from her hands, studying them with the intensity of someone whose entire worldview was crumbling. This can't be real. You're a cleaning lady. You work for minimum wage. Actually, Angela said gently, I don't work for minimum wage. I don't work for any wage. I own the company that employs the cleaning staff. I own the building you live in, and I own several other properties throughout the city. She gestured around the elegant lobby. But for the past 2 months, I've also been Angie, the woman who cleaned your apartments, listened to your conversations, and experienced firsthand how you treat people you consider beneath your notice. The crowd was processing this information with visible difficulty. Angela could see the moment when each person began to remember their interactions with Angie and realize the implications. Victoria stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. I need to say something to everyone here. The crowd turned to look at her, several residents nodding with recognition. For the past 6 weeks, Dr. Thompson has been cleaning my apartment, Victoria continued. And for those 6 weeks, I treated her with systematic cruelty. I called her worthless trash. I deliberately created messes for her to clean. I told her she was born to serve people like me. The crowd listened with growing discomfort as Victoria continued her public confession. I did these things because I believed her appearance meant she was less valuable than me, less intelligent, less worthy of respect, less human. Victoria's voice broke slightly. I was wrong about everything. Mrs. Henderson found her voice again. Victoria, you can't seriously believe this story. It's obviously some kind of elaborate con. It's not a con, Cynthia interrupted, stepping forward with teenage awkwardness, but genuine courage. I Googled her. Dr. Angela Thompson, Thompson Industries $4.7 billion net worth, it's all real. She turned to face the crowd directly. And I've been just as awful as Mrs. Ashford. I filmed Dr. Thompson and other cleaning staff working, posted videos mocking them online, treated them like they were entertainment instead of human beings. Cynthia's voice grew stronger as she continued. But today I deleted every one of those videos because I realized I don't want to be the kind of person who hurts others for fun. Angela watched the faces in the crowd as these confessions sank in. She could see recognition, fear, and in some cases, the beginning of genuine remorse. Dr. Thompson, Mr. Philip said, his earlier bluster replaced by obvious concern. What are your intentions here? Are you planning to evict residents? Raise rents? Pursue legal action? Angela considered the question carefully. Mr. Phillips, what would you do if you discovered that your tenants were systematically abusing your employees? The question hung in the air without an answer. Over the past 2 months, Angela continued, I've documented numerous instances of verbal abuse, deliberate harassment, and treatment of staff that violates basic human dignity. Not from everyone. There are residents here who have always been kind and respectful, but from enough people to create a culture of cruelty. She walked to the building's mission statement, mounted in an elegant frame near the elevators. When I purchased this building, I installed this mission statement. It promises that Meridian Towers will be a community where all residents and staff are treated with dignity and respect. Angela turned back to face the crowd. Based on what I've experienced, we failed to live up to that promise. Mrs. Henderson, who had been growing quieter as the implications sank in, finally spoke. Dr. Thompson, what do you want from us? I want you to make a choice, Angela replied. The same choice that Victoria and Cynthia have already made. You can continue being the people who treat others as less than human, or you can decide to become the kind of people this community was meant to house. She pulled out her phone and showed the screen to the crowd. I have an offer from Luxor Properties to purchase this building for $600 million. They plan to evict all current residents and convert it to ultra-luxury condos for international investors. The crowd's anxiety level rose visibly. But I also have another option, Angela continued. I can keep the building and work with residents who are willing to commit to treating all people, staff, service workers, delivery personnel, everyone, with basic human dignity. Marcus stepped forward from behind the security desk. Dr. Thompson, if I may say something? Angela nodded encouragingly. In 8 years working here, I've seen how most residents treat staff, Marcus said. Some, like Mrs. Patterson in 7B and Mr. Chen in 11A, have always been respectful. They learn our names, ask about our families, treat us like human beings. He gestured toward Victoria and Cynthia. But others have treated us like we're invisible. Or worse. Today, watching Mrs. Ashford and young Miss Morrison take responsibility for their actions, that gives me hope that things can really change. Angela smiled at Marcus, then addressed the crowd again. Here's what I'm proposing. Every resident of this building will sign a community charter committing to treat all staff with respect and dignity. Those who violate this charter will receive 1 warning, then face immediate lease termination. Mrs. Henderson looked panicked. You can't just evict people for being rude to staff. Actually, I can, Angela said calmly. As the building owner, I have significant discretion in lease renewals. But more importantly, I want to create a community where rudeness to staff is unthinkable, not just prohibited. She walked to the center of the lobby, addressing the entire group. I'm also establishing the Meridian Community Foundation. Every resident who signs the charter and demonstrates genuine commitment to our community values will receive a 50% reduction in their rent. The money saved will go directly to educational scholarships and healthcare assistance for building staff and their families. The crowd erupted in surprised conversation. Angela raised her hand for quiet. But, she continued, this only works if the change is genuine. If people are just performing kindness to save money while harboring the same attitudes, the foundation fails and everyone returns to full rent. Victoria stepped forward again. Dr. Thompson, I'd like to make my own contribution to the foundation, as an apology for my behavior and a commitment to doing better. She pulled out her checkbook and wrote something quickly, then handed it to Angela. $100,000 to start. Angela looked at the check with surprise, then at Victoria with genuine respect. This is very generous, but it's not generous, Victoria interrupted. It's necessary. I need to prove to myself as much as anyone that I'm serious about changing. Cynthia stepped forward awkwardly. I don't have money like that, but I want to help too. Could I volunteer with the foundation? Maybe help other kids who are dealing with family issues? Angela felt something powerful stirring in her chest. The same feeling she'd experienced when she'd first decided to build something meaningful. Cynthia, I think that's a wonderful idea. Mrs. Henderson had been watching these exchanges with growing uncertainty. Dr. Thompson, if we agree to this charter, how do we know you won't just sell the building anyway? Angela pulled out another document from her briefcase. Because I'm placing the building in a community trust. If the charter succeeds and residents demonstrate genuine commitment to our values, ownership will gradually transfer to a resident staff council over the next 10 years. The implications of this announcement sent another wave of surprised conversation through the crowd. You're giving us the building? Mr. Phillips asked, incredulous. I'm giving you the opportunity to earn it, Angela corrected. By proving that a community based on mutual respect and dignity can actually work. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Click the next one, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes in kindness. Marcus approached Angela with a clipboard. Dr. Thompson, I took the liberty of printing out signature sheets for anyone who wants to commit to the charter immediately. Angela looked at the security guard with new appreciation. Marcus, how would you feel about becoming the building's community relations manager? It would come with a significant salary increase and the responsibility for helping implement these changes. Marcus's face lit up with genuine joy. Dr. Thompson, I'd be honored. Victoria was the first to sign the charter, followed immediately by Cynthia. One by one, other residents approached the clipboard, some with obvious reluctance, others with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. Mrs. Henderson was among the last to approach, her hand trembling slightly as she signed her name. Dr. Thompson, she said quietly, I want you to know that I've been thinking about how I've treated the staff here. I'm ashamed of my behavior, and I want to do better. Angela studied the older woman's face, seeing genuine remorse rather than just fear of consequences. Mrs. Henderson, change is possible at any age. I believe you can become the person you want to be." As the last resident signed the charter, Angela looked around the lobby that had been the scene of so much tension just an hour before. The atmosphere had transformed completely. Instead of angry, fearful people protecting their privilege, she saw a community taking its first tentative steps toward becoming something better. Victoria approached her as the crowd began to disperse. "Dr. Thompson, I know I can never fully make up for how I treated you, but I want to spend the rest of my time here proving that people can change." "Victoria," Angela said gently, "you've already begun proving that. The courage it took to stand up here and confess your behavior publicly, that's the foundation of real transformation." Cynthia joined them, looking more mature than her 16 years. "Dr. Thompson, thank you for showing me that I could choose to be different. I've never had an adult believe I was capable of changing before." Angela felt tears forming in her eyes for the first time since this entire experience began. "Cynthia, you didn't need me to become a better person. You just needed to decide you were ready." As the lobby emptied, Angela stood with Marcus, Victoria, and Cynthia, looking around the space that would now house a very different kind of community. "Dr. Thompson," Marcus said, "I have to ask, what made you believe this could work, that people could really change?" Angela considered the question, thinking about her journey from that 19-year-old girl scrubbing floors while being dismissed as worthless, to the woman who now owned buildings and changed lives. "Marcus, I've learned that most cruelty comes from pain, fear, or feeling powerless. When you give people the opportunity to find power through compassion instead of domination, many of them will surprise you." She looked around the lobby one more time, seeing it now not as a place where she'd endured humiliation, but as the birthplace of something unprecedented. "Besides," she added with a smile, "I've never met a problem that couldn't be solved with the right combination of patience, resources, and faith in human potential." 3 months later, Meridian Towers had become the most requested residential address in Manhattan, not because of its luxury but because of its community. The waiting list included families specifically seeking a place where their children would learn to treat all people with dignity, and young professionals who wanted to live somewhere that aligned with their values. The Meridian Community Foundation had grown to over $2 million, funded by residents who had discovered that generosity felt better than superiority. Cynthia Morrison had become the foundation's youngest board member, and her anti-bullying workshops for teenagers were being replicated in schools across the city. Victoria Ashford had returned to the volunteer work she'd abandoned after her husband's death, finding purpose in serving others rather than being served. And Angela Thompson had proven once again that the most powerful transformations began with the simplest acts of courage. The courage to see people as they truly were, the courage to believe they could become better, and the courage to create space for that transformation to happen. Sometimes the most extraordinary changes began in the most ordinary moments. Sometimes the people who looked like they had the least power were exactly the ones who could change everything. And sometimes, the greatest gift you could give someone was the chance to become the person they were always meant to be. In the end, Angela had discovered something more valuable than another investment property. She had found proof that humanity, dignity, and compassion could triumph over prejudice, cruelty, and indifference, but only when someone was brave enough to create the conditions for that triumph to occur. The marble floors of Meridian Towers still gleamed under crystal chandeliers, but now they reflected something far more precious than luxury. They reflected a community where every person mattered, regardless of their job, their background, or their bank account. And in the building's elegant lobby, a new mission statement hung in a place of honor. At Meridian Towers, we believe that true wealth is measured not by what we own, but by how we treat the people who share our world. It was signed simply, Dr. Angela Thompson, Community Builder.